Hey, baby. What's going on? Yeah, I know. I'm in a weirdly good mood for, what is it, like 11:30? Yeah, I get it. But you will be happy to know that I have some rather exciting news. I know I don't really talk about my job all that much, because it's kind of weird that I'm, putting a bunch of people to sleep when I have you. But I don't know, something really cool happened today and I really wanted to share it. Yeah. Here, let me I'll get my phone. Someone wrote me a story. Yeah. It's called All a Frog Could Need and a Little More. I kind of read through it a little and it looked really sweet, so I wanted to read it to you, if that's okay. Yay. Alright, snuggle up, okay? Oh. That's good. You really like putting your head on my chest, huh? I am a very good pillow. Thank you. Okay. Gotta put on my story time voice. Once upon a time, in a conveniently unspecified location, there was a park with a pond. In that pond lived a little green frog. That's me. Who will be referred to simply as Frog. Nice. Do not mistake them for any other frog. In fact, it would be hard for that to happen, as Frog was the only frog in the pond. Yes, that's right. There were no other little creatures like Frog in the entire park, but that didn't stop them from making friends with other animals. They befriended a few dogs that would visit the park regularly, a stray cat, a bunch of different birds, and even the old owl who only came out at night. Humans were a little tricky, though. As such, Frog didn't feel that lonely. One evening, after most people left the park, the little green fella hopped around the pond like they'd always do. Always. After the third lap, they sat down on a lily pad and sighed. They looked up at the darkening sky, taking a moment to reflect. Something is not right, the frog thought to himself, listening to the not-quite silence of the park. I don't feel good for some reason. Hopping around usually makes me happy, so why is this time different? Haunted by that thought, the small creature tried hopping in the opposite direction. They tried hopping on top of lilies to get across the pond. They even tried doing a backflip. A success that was, but it didn't bring Frog any satisfaction. Suddenly, a realization struck them. They were bored. Oh, so bored. As it slowly sank in, Frustration turned into a tugging, anxious feeling. How could that be? Frog? Getting bored with frog activities? That's unheard of. No, that would be ridiculous. Silly, even. They just needed something else to do for the evening. To change the pace. With that goal in mind, Frog leapt away from the pond toward the nearest cobbled path. An adventure, that's what I need, they assured themselves. But how does one have an adventure in a place they'd known their whole life? Unless something changed while Frog was asleep. Not possible. They would have noticed. Everything would be the same as always, meaning no excitement. Having passed by a few benches, the little croaker was starting to feel disappointed, until they noticed something lying on top of the flat surface. Behold, entertainment. Frog happily jumped on top of the bench, seeking to inspect the item. It was a book, a fairy tale to be precise. Reading one could certainly be an amazing experience, as they'd never had the chance to see one before. But alas, Frog did not possess that ability. That is to say, they did not know how to read. But even if they did... That's funny, I'm sorry, that's really funny. But even if they did, they were simply too small to turn the pages by themselves. Such are the cons of being a tiny frog. Frog sat down, a little dejected, deciding to at least enjoy the book's cover illustration. A pretty pond, one similar to the one in the park, with shimmering water and big lily pads. On one of them sat a happy frog, quite similar to Frog, but it was wearing a flowy cape and a crown, and next to it stood a girl in a pink dress. A diadem on her head. I don't think I know that word. Crazy. There was also a little castle in the background, probably where the girl came from. That was about it, not counting the letters Frog couldn't understand. The tiny guy stared in awe, wondering if they would also look good in such a silly hat. It was unusual, but Frog wouldn't mind trying out that style. Who knows? Maybe it would suit them. Do you think you'd look good in a diadem? I think you'd look good in a diadem. Their musings were interrupted by a subtle sound of someone landing on the bench. Frog recognized that sound and turned around to greet their dear friend. It was the old owl. After exchanging greetings, the owl looked down at the book, then at Frog. "Do you require my assistance?" he asked. "Yes, please," Frog croaked. "Your feet have strong talons, so you can turn pages easily. And you know how to read, too. Could you please help me read this story?" "It would be my pleasure to help, friend. I recognize this tale, and I think you might like it." The book, as one might have expected, was a story about a frog prince. Its language was simple, for it was a book meant for children. The frog, after receiving a kiss from a beautiful princess, took on a human form. The old owl kept reading the story, mentioning marriage and a happily ever after. But Frog had already stopped listening by that point. They instead stared in wonder at the picture of one particular scene. The princess had picked up the frog to plant a kiss on its head, breaking a spell. The starry sky behind them added to the quite literally magical moment, and the frog prince looked so happy too. Frog, our frog, couldn't help but think about it. The little jumping baby didn't know much about the world outside the park, nor other frogs. They were unaware of things that other frogs did, What they did know, though, was that books are smart, and some humans would study them. Frog knew what studying meant. Therefore, confronted with an unquestionable source of knowledge while lacking it themselves, the green-colored goofball took the story literally, firmly believing that all frogs had the ability to transform into humans, provided they received a kiss. Absolutely elated, Frog thanked the owl for his help before parting ways. Suddenly, everything felt much more exciting. Even the water reflecting the same old moon seemed prettier than usual. Frog would find it hard to sleep that night, instead keeping their little brain busy with trying to imagine how they would look in human form. Oop, I lost my place. Oh, there we are. Would I be a tall, handsome prince? They asked themselves, giddy, or a beautiful princess in a flowy dress? These images would appear more often with each passing day, teasing Frog with daydreams about a future that could be. They found themselves sitting on a rock formation and staring at park-goers instead of swimming in the pond. The time that could be spent practicing long jumps was instead wasted on curious eavesdropping on human conversations. The more Frog dreamed, the more they wished they could be that prince or princess. Surely then people would want to befriend them. Frog had always wanted to be friends with humans, but the huge size difference was one of many obstacles in the way of achieving that goal. If only they had a human form, of a rich, attractive individual at that. No one would be able to resist them. That's it. That's what they'd need to do. There was no time for frog activities. They must become human as soon as possible. And for that, there was only one way. Oh boy. For the next few days, loud croaking could be heard from the pond. It was obviously none other than Frog, but they weren't practicing any frog songs. They were trying to communicate with people passing by. Alas, humans don't understand animal language, so Frog's questions received no answer. And what were they asking? Well, "Excuse me, mister, could I ask for a kiss? It'll turn me into a princess, so I can be friends with humans. Then you would understand me," was one of them. Frog asked, despite being aware of the language barrier. "Hello, miss. Could I take a moment of your time? I'm sorry for bothering you on your walk, but could I receive a kiss? I will turn into a prince and throw a big party in the park." A popular one. Frog promised good fun, believing it would help in breaking the ice between future friends. "Hi, you. Yes, you. Forgive me for being so bold, but I need a favor. I need to turn into a human, and for that I need a kiss. Could you please help me with that? I will be royalty then, so I can give you lots of gold if you wanted." Straight up bribery. Seeing how their efforts were fruitless, Frog thought about a different, more direct approach to the situation. They would start jumping off of the pond and on to the pavement as someone walked by, hoping to actually be noticed for once. While that did work, the attention they received wasn't what they were looking for. Sure, seeing people surprised or smiling at them felt nice, but it didn't bring them any closer to their goal. People would simply stare for a while, maybe take a picture, and then move on. Oh, and not to mention the frog haters. Wow. The very thought made Frog shudder. The haters, after being spooked, would yell at Frog angrily. It hurt them a little, as they were called bad names when they didn't mean any harm. Their raised voice also scared the little froggy to the point where they needed to hide in the pond for some time, making them miss occasions to ask other questions and pushing them further away from their dream. After a particularly bad day filled with being chased away, Frog sat in the reeds, hiding. They were taking a breather, initially willing to try a few more times, but they soon noticed how anxious they were, and how staying in the reeds felt better than being outside where big meanies could reach them. Frog suddenly felt really sad, realizing that befriending humans could be too hard for them. A tiny creature with a big ambition so huge it could easily crush them. Looking at it like that, it really felt impossible to achieve. They don't like me because I'm a frog, they thought, hanging their little head low. So I absolutely need to become human. But for that to happen, I have to get close, and I can't get close if I'm not human. Having reached the conclusion that they're stuck in a loop, they gave up thinking about it, knowing it would only make them feel worse. It is what it is, as some say, and there was nothing we can do. At least, not when feeling like this. Frog carefully peeked out of their hiding spot, trying to assess whether it was safe enough to leave yet. No threats over the horizon, the distant bustle and the sun preparing to set for the evening. They could leave, so they did, but not before gathering all their courage first. To heck with meanies and haters. No one can possibly stop a determined frog from, well, currently, the frog equivalent of taking a walk around. They just had to clear their head and everything would be fine. Yeah. Frog leapt out from the reeds, intending to forget all those mean, bad, menacing, tall. Oh no. The world decided to pull a cruel prank on the poor froglet, having them jump out right as someone approached the pond. They must have walked over when Frog was hyping himself up, and that's why the green fella didn't hear any footsteps. Frog didn't dare move. They wouldn't even if they did dare. That's how scared they were at the moment, hoping to somehow appear invisible. It works on that one kind of dinosaur, so it was only logical to try it with a human. But it was too late. The man had already seen them. The silence as they stared at each other was unbearable. Sorry, it's my first time. I don't do this often. You having fun? Good. You getting sleepy? Good. Okay. The silence as they stared at each other was unbearable, dragging on and feeling like it lasted forever, when in reality it was but a few seconds. Frog blinked, carefully studying the man's face. He was surprised, but not mad, which calmed the traumatized frog down a little. "Ah, I almost stepped on you. Sorry. Be careful, little guy." He squatted down, causing Frog to make a small jump in the opposite direction. Frog was genuinely surprised by that reaction, as if they had completely forgotten about the existence of nice people. This big dude wasn't a threat. Quite the opposite, actually. Despite his size, he moved slowly, and he spoke softly as to not spook the pond dweller anymore. He appeared to be a chill person. Frog also found his voice quite pleasant, so maybe they could trust him. While Frog pondered, the gentle stranger pulled out his phone to take a picture. A typical reaction, but wait a moment. This meant that not only was this frog not a frog hater, this guy was a frog liker. Whoa. Frog relaxed, glad to have finally met someone nice at the end of a horrible day. It made it a little more bearable. "I can't believe how small you are." That enough was a compliment for the very tiny fella, who took pride in their crumb-sizedness. But the further comment stunned them. "That's cute. You're so cute." Having never been called that before, Frog wanted to wave their little arms in protest, despite the adjective being positive. What they didn't yet notice, though, was that this human being was actually talking to them as if they could have a real conversation. People did that sometimes with their dogs while walking in the park, so it wouldn't be that unusual. But talking to a frog was a little different. You can't expect a frog to react the same way when you speak to it in that funny voice. They didn't have the means of showing it, so why would you even try? It would appear that this individual was, simply put, a little silly, maybe even goofy, which was, in all honesty, refreshing to the little Frogger. While Frog, exhausted from the long day, did not attempt communication, they would croak politely in response to the man's questions. It would be rude to ignore him, after all. He asked about other frogs, and whether they'd also be so small. Frog couldn't answer, as much as they wanted to, because there were simply no other frogs in Frog's pond. Once again, Frog was hit with sudden melancholy, as the reality of that statement sank in. No frog friends, no frog experience. What if Frog wasn't doing well at being a frog, and there just wasn't any frog to tell them that? Huh? Tell you what, the gentle voice interrupted Frog's train of thought before they could start overthinking. There's a pond not too far from where I live, and I know that there are frogs there. How about I take you to them? You seem a little lonely, all by yourself. Oop, I lost my place again. Okay. The small green dreamer stared as the man put his hand out invitingly, taking their sweet time to consider his words. Was Frog lonely? They weren't sure, but they did want to see other frogs. Maybe that would cheer them up a little. They could also ask how to get a kiss and turn into a human. Yes, that'd be perfect. It surely must be a sign. It would be a mistake to pass up such an opportunity. Frog immediately leapt forward with enthusiasm, earning a chuckle out of their savior, whose name, as they would later learn, was Olivine. Hey, that's me. Frog was excited to see a completely new place, the immediate change of mood forcing aside any previous doubts. As it turned out, not too far meant as much as very close, actually. Tempted by curiosity, Frog decided to have a closer look at the place their new ally came from. Rather than approach the pond immediately, they would have probably followed Ollie all the way to his garden in secret if it weren't for the giddy croaks they forgot to hold back. You silly little guy. The pond is over there. He picked up Frog and turned them around to face the correct direction. Why'd you follow me, huh? Just go on. But Frog was stubborn. The same thing happened 5 more times. They really wanted to go with Olivine and refused to go away, causing the man to let out a deep sigh before finally yielding. He couldn't believe he just lost a fight with a frog. Shaking his head, Ollie carried the sly little carried the frog all the way to the garden. In all honesty, he shouldn't have done that, as Frog, upon seeing it, decided this would be their new home for the time being. Could the little fella finally make up their mind? The garden was so beautiful and so big compared to the tiny froglet that it felt like a whole new world. A person coming from such a pretty, well-kept place must surely have a huge heart. And that building over there, it was enormous in the eyes of the small critter. It reminded them of a castle. Pretty flowers bloomed in clusters in various places, creating perfect spots to hide and have a potential nap in. Every single thing in there was filled the newcomer with wonder. Wait, a castle? Near a pond? And a kind-hearted, handsome guy? Frog stared ahead, the current view overlapping with a memory of an illustration from the fairy tale. They thought about the entire situation, a single, exhausted brain cell bouncing around in their head like a screensaver until it finally hit the corner, forming a conclusion. Frog just became acquainted with a prince, and, once again, Frog's goal changed immediately. There's no need to ask other frogs how to turn into a human if there's a prince right in front of them. During the next few weeks, Frog would appear in the garden every day, waiting for a chance to meet Olivine. They needed to somehow let him know about their grand plan, but at the same time, they just simply enjoyed spending time around him, especially since every time he'd water his plants and notice Frog, he'd smile and talk to them, even if a true conversation was not possible. But it still felt nice to listen to Ollie talk about his day. Was it his voice, or the fact that with each story, Frog became more and more curious about this person? The frog that always paid attention when the prince spoke. So immersed, they would sometimes find themselves reacting a certain way. They cheered for every good moment and sat closer to him every time he sounded troubled or tired. Frog wanted to better show just how much they empathized with him, but for that, they'd need a human form. Frog tried acting cute around him, tilting their head with curiosity or doing little tricks, all in an effort to somehow receive a kiss. They were aware of how selfish it made them look, but they kept telling themselves that they'd explain everything once they had the chance to. It was for the sake of friendship, after all. At times, they'd try bumping into Olivine's hand, trying to get him to pick them up, but that only made him worried. "Are you feeling okay? Are you sick?" These questions would immediately make Frog feel guilty, stopping any further attempts. Time passed, and Frog began growing desperate. They really needed to be human. How else would they be able to show others how much they care for them? They want to give hugs and words of encouragement. Being a frog made it all impossible because their arms were too small and croaking not understood by many. Frog was restless, leaping in circles at night and being unable to find a comfortable place for themselves during the day. The pent-up frustrations manifested in quite silly ways. One time, the green fella spent over half a day sitting angrily beside Ollie's hoodie hood, croaking all the time. They later felt a little bad, thinking that they bothered him in that way, but the merciful prince didn't mind at all. There was another situation. That one was, well, quite unexpected for both sides. Frog tried jumping on Ollie's shoulder to get closer to his face, desperately manifesting a loophole in fairy tale magic that would allow a transformation as long as there was contact between the frog's head and the man's lips. Yes, they literally planned to gonk themselves against the guy's face. Not the smartest idea, but a creative one for sure. That's for sure. They never got to find out if that method worked, as an unfortunate combination of Frog's miscalculation and Olivine turning around caused the tiny plotter to completely miss their mark. Instead of landing on his shoulder, Frog accidentally slipped under his shirt, tumbled down, fell out, and flopped on the ground, causing an awkward silence as both tried to process what the heck just happened. As much as the attempt was an absolute failure. Oh my gosh, no, I keep accidentally pressing the scroll button and then losing my place. Here we are. Okay. As much as the attempt was an absolute failure, Frog didn't want to see it as a waste of time. In a way, Frog considered it a win. Eventually, there was an evening where the ambitious fella needed to rest, and once again considered all their options before trying anything. They sat on a rock, looking up at the moon, too tired to come up with a new plan. They let out a small ribbit, not expecting to draw attention to themselves. "Oh, you're still here." It wasn't a question, but an amused exclamation. "Hello, Prince. You know, I showed my sweetheart these pictures of you a while ago, and we came up with a name for you, 'cause we think you're pretty cool and deserve one." Frog croaked loudly in surprise as Ollie gently picked them up. A name? For them? No one had ever... my god, I did it again. No. There we go. They felt a name for them. There we go. No one had ever done something so special for them. They felt so touched, albeit a little shy. A name for you, he repeated, as if he knew what Frog was thinking about. Oak. Do you like it? Oak was silent for a moment, repeating the name over and over in their head, enjoying the idea and sound of it. Oak? Oak? Oak. It almost sounds like croak, as in the frog that the sound that frogs make. Maybe I need sleep too. Wow. It made them like it even more. Oak was overjoyed. They heard Olivine chuckle at their giddy reaction. I'll take that as a yes. I'm glad you like it. And with that, he planted a gentle kiss on top of Frog's head, in the night, under a full moon, just like in the fairy tale. And if Oak could cry, no, they'll turn into a human any moment now, so they will surely cry of happiness. They squeeze their eyes shut, waiting to turn into a prince, or a princess. That was the most beautiful moment of their little frog life. They were so excited they didn't even feel the transformation, which was a bit weird. Surely it would. Oh. As Oak opened their eyes, their little frog eyes, they realized that nothing happened. Nothing at all. But how could this be? It must be a mistake. It just must be. It should have worked. Oak slowly looked up at Olivine, guilt in their eyes, feeling as if they had to apologize, but they couldn't bear to meet his eyes. All this bothering and being annoying, taking up his time and getting in his way, and he doesn't get anything for it. Oak was so selfish. They didn't deserve to be there, in that beautiful garden. They couldn't reciprocate his kindness. Those were the thoughts they had, as dramatic and unfit for a frog as they were. But if only Oak had managed to stay still for a moment longer, they would have noticed that the one holding them, was smiling. He didn't realize his companion's struggle, as he simply didn't mind any of those things. Overtaken by emotions, the frog leapt out of Ollie's palms, quickly reaching the nearest bush and hiding there, much to the man's surprise. Oak had to figure out why the kiss thing didn't work, then fix it. In their little green head, it was the only right thing to do. The escapee wasn't sure how much time had passed, as all their focus was on restudying the fairy tale from memory. Everything seemed to line up, until something suddenly clicked. Prince Olivine was not wearing a crown. Realizing such an obvious thing made Oak feel a little dumb, and I wasn't wearing one either. I was not wearing one because I'm not royalty, but is he not a prince? Did you know you're dating a prince? I didn't. You think I'd make a good prince? Yeah, you're so right. I would run my kingdom into the ground. So it wouldn't work because neither of them were true royalty. But that would mean that everything was for nothing, right? They would never become a human. They'd never be able to befriend humans. Oak lingered on that thought, feeling like that statement was just wrong for some reason. Earlier, it didn't matter if someone was wearing a crown. The froglet would approach them anyway. But what was it? What was the reason for turning human in the first place? Right, to befriend. And does one need to be the same species as the other to be friends with them? No. Oak was friends with dogs, cats, and birds already. Do you always have to understand each other? No. Oak loved to listen to Oak loved to listen to the owl talking about smart stuff they knew nothing about. So, once you think about it, there really aren't any limits to forming friendships, as long as you feel good with the other person. And to be honest, the lily pad enjoyer wanted to be friends with Olivine. Oak slowly peeked out from under the bush, looking around the garden. They've been hiding from Ollie for some time, not brave enough to face him after that dramatic escape. But now that he wasn't actually there, the space felt so empty. The frog had to admit they missed the silly, soft-spoken guy. In a few jumps, they moved from the bush to a rock they enjoyed sitting on. It was one of their favorite spots in the entire garden, because Ollie would sometimes sit down near it when he needed to rest, and then he'd sing a sweet song, and everything would be nice. Oak spent enough time there to create beautiful memories of the place, and all were filled with his presence. That was actually the best part about them. As the jumper reminisced about the near past, they noticed something. Olivine was almost always smiling in their memories, and every time he wasn't, it was not Oak's fault. Usually the cause would be a bad event, completely unrelated to the small creature. So, he was genuinely enjoying my company, even if I couldn't answer or ask or do stuff with him. They felt as if their little mind suddenly expanded, opening up new possibilities, and I just never noticed because I was so focused on everything else. If it was possible... Oh my gosh. There it is. If it was possible, their jaw would drop to the ground in a literal sense. That's how shocking the revelation was. Tunnel vision almost made Oak miss something very obvious, that they already had a friend, because, obviously, Ollie cared about them so much. He wanted to make sure they wouldn't be lonely, showed them the garden, let them stay. He talked and talked, sang, joked around, shared joys and troubles with them, and Oak cared about him too, wanting to help him even when they knew they couldn't. Isn't that what friendship is about? I never needed to change anything. I can just be myself. They corrected themselves, as saying could implied a lost chance. They were not going to lose anything. Oak needed to see their friend as soon as possible, but they knew that going out of the garden to look for him was out of the question. They would have easily gotten lost or hurt, and that only create problems instead of fixing them. Yes, things still needed fixing, but now the determined Frogget knew exactly what to do. Their mind was clear, and their vision was not obstructed by fog of self-doubt anymore, so they waited patiently for Olivine's return. As soon as they noticed him in the corner of their vision, Oak lunged forward with a big croak, eager to let him know that they feel better. "Is that you, Oak?" He looked down in surprise to confirm the frog's identity. "It is! My God, where have you gone? You got me so worried here I thought I scared you off." He remembered their name. Well, that's a given, seeing how he was the one to name them. That's a bare minimum, which didn't mean any less for Oak. They valued everything they received from Ollie. Then he recognized them when they could be any other frog. It made the froglet feel so special. They found their words stuck in their little froggy throat for a moment. "I'm sorry, my prince. It was not your fault. I was just stuck with some bad thoughts, but I'm better now." Yes, Oak still called Ollie a prince, despite him not being royalty, because they simply thought he was fit for that title. It shouldn't matter if his blood was blue, or something. That's the term they use in the books, so Oak decided to stick to it. If his actions proved how good of a person he was. Responsible, caring, gentle, full of empathy and love for little things. That's a perfect image of a prince. and since he apparently knew more frogs, Oak thought they would surely share their sentiment and agree. That would officially make Olivine the Frog Prince. And even if for some weird reason they wouldn't agree, which was impossible, by the way, then in their small but loving frog heart, he would still be their prince. Crown or no crown, in the opinions of others, that didn't matter. I'm sorry. Next time I want to give you a kiss, I'll ask first. Consent and stuff. That's something I'd totally say. That's fine. I don't even need a kiss anymore. I'm alright with being a frog. They still didn't realize that was not how it worked, and there was no one to tell them otherwise. But oh well. I'm so glad you're back. It felt kinda sad without you here. You're a part of my garden now, it seems. He smiled earnestly. Promise you won't suddenly leave again? I mean, you can leave if you want, but do let me know first, so I don't freak out. Promise. Oak answered without much thought, because why would they ever want to leave? Well, maybe to visit the frog pond, but for no other reason. Nuh-uh. This place is far too nice to leave it behind. It truly feels like home. They are happy here. That's what matters the most. Oak has a human friend. Only one for now, but that's enough. They're not in a rush to make more. It's an honest friendship, where they are appreciated and loved for who they really are, and that makes it special. And their old friends from the park didn't forget about Oak either. They would pass by or visit the garden often, so the little froglet never lost anything despite the sudden changes. They grew as a frog because they were not a person, and learned an important lesson. It was all a little frog could ever need. That, and a little more. The end. What'd you think? I liked it too. Let's go to bed now, huh? Good night, darling. I'll see you in the morning.